This, once again, can be actually explained through the idea of excursions being somewhat localized in how they affect the planet. Certain regions do not get affected as much as other regions. And because of this, certain regions become more climatically affected by certain things than, for example, a region that's on the other side of the planet. But the question is, of course, how did this really affect the planet? And this is where the scientists in this paper look at some of the other events that may have happened around this time and essentially correlate this with several major events that did occur around the same region around the same time. Specifically, the sudden disappearance of megafauna. A large amount of Australian megafauna, or essentially these really large animals that used to exist in Australia and New Zealand, more or less suddenly vanished around the same time. Sometimes it's actually quoted as around 46,000 years ago, but certain studies discover it to be closer to about 42,000 years ago. Now, naturally, this is a correlation, not a causation, but a very interesting correlation nevertheless. It has been actually speculated that maybe it was the result of human overhunting them, but the disappearance was extremely sudden, and it's also assumed that humans have arrived to this region about 10,000 years prior to their disappearance, so it wouldn't really make sense. But what's even more interesting is that the implication in this paper is that the excursion was also probably responsible for the extinction of our cousins, the Neanderthals. We know that the Neanderthals also have suddenly gone extinct roughly around 40,000 years ago. Now, it previously has been implied that this was maybe a result of some sort of a competition with humans, basically with us, but the proof for this was never really there. As a matter of fact, in the last couple of years, pretty much most of the studies started to imply that the Neanderthals have actually gone extinct because of the climate change. And this paper specifically makes a very strong case for it, correlating the excursion event and the various effects that it might have created on the planet with the extinction of Neanderthals and a lot of other species on the planet. And so this of course implies that the excursion event had some major biological effects on the biosphere of our planet. A lot of species might have actually not survived the event, and species that did survive it might have been affected by it in some other ways. But the most interesting correlation that they present in this paper is something that actually kind of surprised me. It's in regards to what happened to us. They actually discovered that around the same time our ancestors started to create a lot of these really interesting cave paintings using this very unusual red dye known as the red ochre. It actually did appear very suddenly around this time, around 42,000 years ago, and was found to be displayed in various caves around the planet. It just so happens that the modern humans still use red ochre for something here on the planet. It's actually used as a kind of a sunscreen by certain tribes in Africa. The actual name is Ogizi, which is exactly what it's called. Probably not. Anyway, that's what a lot of tribes in Namibia still use today to protect themselves from the dangerous effects of the sun and from basically being burned by the ultraviolet radiation. And you might kind of already see where I'm going with this. It looks like 42,000 years ago, when the magnetic field weakened and when a lot of radiation started to reach our planet, and very likely also started to decrease the ozone layer as well, the amount of UV light on the planet also increased dramatically. This obviously would cause things to burn pretty easily. UV light is pretty damaging to a lot of different cells, and because of this, maybe ancient humans discovered the secret weapon, the ability to protect themselves from the UV light, which allowed them to kind of survive and to thrive afterwards. We don't really know if this is exactly what happened, but it is kind of implied in the study. But because the atmosphere was so ionized, it also very likely changed the climate completely. There was a lot of lightning, a lot of storms, a lot of different conditions that simply do not exist today, so the entire night skies probably looked very different from how it is today. And for all we know, maybe because of all of these crazy conditions outside, including lightning strikes, very powerful sun, and a lot of radiation coming from everywhere, the humans decided to stick around the caves a lot more frequently, thus allowing them to basically create these paintings that we later found. None of this is of course a fact yet, but the implications coming from the study and the analysis performed in the study are nevertheless very interesting. But that's all cool and all. How does it actually affect us? Well, it just so happens that we don't really know when the next excursion is going to happen. Some people have already started to speculate that we're sort of headed there. As a matter of fact, if you look at the total strength of the magnetic field, it looks like it kind of weakened in the last century or so. It actually is about 10% weaker than it was roughly around 200 years ago. At the same time, we have this new thing going on with the magnetic north suddenly moving extremely fast. So fast, as a matter of fact, that the scientists had to recalculate their previous assumption about how fast it's moving. You can actually see this right here with the modeled prediction versus the observed motion of the magnetic field, showing us how far and how quickly it has already moved just in these 5 years. There's currently no actual explanation for what's happening with the magnetic north, but some people have already implied that maybe this is what's going to happen in the next few hundreds of years. Maybe, just maybe, we are actually headed toward an excursion event. And if we are to learn anything from the past, from the event 42,000 years ago, and also from the effects we've already observed with the anomaly in the south that has already destroyed at least one satellite, this is something that we might want to kind of start preparing for just in case. We don't really know if this is exactly what's happening or if it's